Untreated mental health problems are at the very least limiting and add misery to a person's life. At worst, they're life-threatening. Everyone can be helped, everyone can recover, and everyone can lead a life worth living. Find out more about getting help next on Speak Your Mind. Welcome to Speak Your Mind. I'm Dr. Carolyn Phelps, licensed psychologist with the Human Development Center, and as you can see, we're having a pretty good time tonight. Tonight, we're taking your questions on getting help and getting better. So call the numbers on your screen right now. Locally, dial 218-788-2844 or call toll-free at 1-877-307-8762. And you can also text us your questions or email them, as always, using the number or address listed at the bottom of your screen. We are at guest introduction time. Paul Goossens is a licensed psychologist with Harbor City Psychological Associates who works with clients of all ages and a variety of mental health problems. Linda Curran is the St. Louis County Social Service Supervisor, I dare you to say that 3 times, of Adult Mental Health and Adult Protective Services, and Brian Marsolek is president of the Duluth chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. He's also a mental health consumer and has a family member living with mental illness. Thanks to all of you for being here this night. This is the kind of night it's going to be, I think. Thanks for all of you for being here tonight. And we're talking about getting help, and I kind of think of it as getting help to get better. But I know a lot of people even hesitate about getting help, and I think maybe a really good place to start would be to have a little bit of a conversation. We'll start with you, Paul, sure, about what gets in the way of people even seeking help.
Well, I think there are a lot of barriers. I have worked a lot with youth and teens as well as general practice with adults. And they're not known to be eager consumers of mental health, and usually they're going to be dragged in, into counseling or into therapy
by their parents,
by parents or their probation officer or social workers. But I think with youth or adults, a lot of times it really comes down to fears. Fears of uncertainty as to what it's about, what the help is going to be about, or a stigma, or how they might be labeled. If they're in mental health services. Or how their peers are going to see them, or about change that they may be expecting or know that they're going to be making in their life. So it seems to really, a lot of that fear and loss seems to be a significant barrier that I've seen.
Talk a little bit about that, about the fears and the stigma, Linda.
Especially with the group at St. Louis County, we work with the very seriously mentally ill, and I think about the barriers are tremendous. The poverty, the medical issues. You go in for medical problems and people can only see your mental illness, and just, to plan your day even when you don't know what's what. How do you get to your appointments? How do you schedule your day so that it's fulfilling if you can't work? Those kinds of things.
And part of some of the barriers, the stigma that we talk about, and that fear of being labeled. What's been your experience with the people who you've talked with, and just in your association with NAMI, about what other people's experience with that has been?
Well, it's a matter of trying to get past that, and I think that people struggle with that in regards to wanting or seeking help and being able to get past that. And when people call NAMI, that's what they find, a supportive voice, someone they can talk to, and find out that there is potential help out there to reach out to.
And I know a lot of people who I've talked with, in my own practice, some of those fears are about that notion, I don't want to have a problem.
Right.
What does it mean if I have a problem? What does it mean for me for the rest of my life? Or does that mean I'm defective or not as good as I wish I could be? What's been your experience with that?
Well, I think all of those things, and whether I'm working with youth or older, folks, I think some of those, again, the fears, and so my experience has been to try to understand them and meet the clients where they're at, and really sort of tap into and empathize and validate some of those concerns and some of those fears, and that they have them, and then try to move them beyond that. And some of them may be, if there's a mental illness that is going to be more lifelong and persistent, to provide some accurate information, to provide some resource and some education about that. That doesn't mean a life of misery and destitute, that there really is hope about managing their mental illness. There are a lot of resources about managing their mental illness as a physical illness that might be a lifelong physical illness that needs management.
I think of that too. I think that, we all are on the spectrum as human beings, and we all from time to time need help, and whatever that may be. So I kind of would invite us all to walk the journey with somebody else sometimes. I think sometimes one of the things we can do for people is when they've lost their hope, we can hold their hope a little while for them and keep it kindled and alive until they're ready to take it back. So we're all there. We all experience the human condition in our own ways, and so let us walk with you, and you'll walk with me someday, maybe too.
What a beautiful way of expressing that, of we can hold somebody else's hope for them. And I often talk about that, the paradox of hopelessness, because if you're feeling hopeful, why would you seek help? Because your sense would be that if there is no hope, then what good would help do?
Why bother?
Right,
Sure.
right.
Right.
And when you talk with people, what's your experience with that, Brian?
Well, I can speak for myself in the sense that I live with depression myself, and at some point coming to an understanding for myself that I needed to reach out and try to get some help from others, and what that might mean. That is it a matter of weakness? Is it a matter of coping with? Can't you cope with the situations that are going on, and getting some resolution to that, and finding that you can learn coping skills, find different ways of handling the stress or what's going on. I think for depression, particularly negative kind of a thinking, and learning how to turn that around into positive ways.
And we are such a John Wayne society, to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. America's built on independence, and that whole notion of that is not one that leads me to turn to you and say, I need help, right? That the foundation of America, all of which is very wonderful, and we love our independence, but we are so independent, and often not connected well to other family members either. And sometimes those can create barriers. We have an excellent question here. I think my kid has some problems with depression. I don't want him to be labeled, so I'm hoping I don't have to bring him in to see anyone. Am I overreacting, Paul?
Not necessarily, not necessarily. Yeah, I mean, we need to do the labeling sort of thing to get that insurance and all that, but quite frankly, most of the youth that we see that are struggling with some depression issues, that may be transient, or that may be, more have some more depth to that. I think it really is a matter of time, and really what I try to convey to the parent and to the youth is about that hope, and to come in and let's talk about things, and that it really is fairly normal to have, and particularly with teens, to have episodes of some real down and sad and blue and reactive, and even depression in and of itself is not that abnormal in our human experience. And so to kind of normalize that, really.
Sometimes it is hard to sort out what's normal adolescent behavior and what's abnormal, and sometimes it takes a long time to sort that out also. And I think there's a difference between someone who is really suffering with something that's going to need some help, or an at-risk youth person who maybe can go to Lifehouse and get some of those supports in place, that they'd help you with some housing or some job or school skills.
And I think the other thing about the notion of the label, it's like, I don't think people object so much to the label of diabetes, or they don't object to, they may not want they may not want diabetes, but we don't object to the label of diabetes. And it's not really the label that hurts us, it's the way some people treat other people that is hurtful. And I think that's an important distinction, that in this whole notion of stigma attached, it's the way in which we treat each other.
I think that's one of the things that people contend with, which is difficult, is the isolation and feeling alone, and especially initially when problems are developing, of feeling a lack of support, where to turn. And because it's not a typical medical condition where people feel at ease talking to others, so it's helpful to have resources in town where they feel they can go to.
Absolutely. Here's a question, and I think family members often get lost in the mix, or they are the fall between the cracks group, especially family members of adults. So, sometimes, how do you help a family member or friend with mental health or addiction issues, especially if they refuse help?
You know, that's a tough one. That's and maybe speaking for adults, and Linda can chime in here, that because you may not have that leverage, you may not have that control. What I found is usually there's some people around the adult that has at least some level of influence to be able to say, Fred, can we at least, let's go see somebody for a session, a conversation, and that's a critical juncture. We know from research that folks, their first experience, their first intersection with mental health services, that is so critical. So to be able to have that conversation, that initial conversation, to address some of those fears, to really help with some of that hope, but first for someone who thinks they don't have an issue, don't have a problem, to help connect with them, that they can understand and see that people that they care about see some problem, and that in and of itself might be the place to launch.
Well, I also think that same thing you were talking about, Carolyn, is the independence that we're so proud of, and people have civil liberties, and by gosh, don't take my civil liberties away from me. So with adults, it's so painful, because you know that sometimes we see them, or our adult protection team will get calls, and it's not how we would want our relative living. It's not, maybe what we think is a healthy lifestyle, and with a little support, or hey, go to a NAMI group or get some support from a case manager or a good therapist, your life could be so much better. But we don't get to make those decisions for other people. People have civil liberties, and they get to make their own decisions until they're not capable of making their own decisions, and so we take pride in it. So we have to honor it on both ends. And
I think that is a tricky balance that I'll tell folks. In our culture, we have the laws and civil liberties that it's not illegal to live a very miserable, unhappy life. It's not illegal to live a very addicted and very self-destructive life, that long-term self-destructive. And so it really is to try to help educate and break through some of those.
And to watch a loved one
do that
is just dreadful.
That's just brutal,
And I know one of the things that NAMI provides is a lot of support for families. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, and I think that's a typical kind of concern that might come up, is the frustration that family members have, and concerns they have over a loved one, and not seeing the problem, or not willing to accept what's going on. And we provide a family support group on a monthly basis, and encouraging family members to find ways to take care of themselves, even though this is the situation.
And I think that's so important, because that can be certain situations for some families can be so stressful. And then what you have are family members not taking care of themselves, and reminding them that it's okay, and it's also our own responsibility to take care of ourselves. Are there self-help groups to help with depression and other mental health problems, Brian?
Yes. Short answer, right?
There is a couple in town that I am. A Minnesota Mental Health Association has a meeting that meets at the Miller Dwan Hospital. I'm not quite sure what the day is, but our website might be able to help with that. Then I think there is a DBSA, depression group that's over in Superior, to my knowledge.
And NAMI is not just for family members, it's for individuals with mental health problems as well, right?
Right.
And so that both constituencies, both groups can get help then. So that first session, when somebody comes to my office, let's talk a little bit about this first session, because when somebody comes to my office, I am so excited to meet a new person, because my feeling is like, oh, this could be really good for you. And somebody asked me tonight, our producer asked me tonight, like, well, what's the first session like for the client coming in? It's like, I know from the other side, And how do you start off a conversation with people?
My standard start these days, and I think I've developed that a long time ago, was what brings you here and what can I do for you? And I think there's a lot that I try to pack into there is how is it you're here, and what's the leverage, but what do you want from me? And sometimes it's I want my parents off my back, or my wife off my back, or my PO off my back, or sometimes it's I don't know. I'm not sure what I want or need, but I'm stuck, and that's where I just dive in and go from there. But I really start with what brings you here and what can I do? What would you like from me?
And I think that's one of the ends of the spectrum, one of the range of services, of the hope that's out there. I think sometimes just changing a behavior or a way of thinking can really make a difference in life, or going for a walk instead of something else. And on the other spectrum, where I think we work more at the county level, is that intense case management, kind of wraparound, one-stop shopping, where you really need more structure and support to manage your daily life and go through.
Because I know what that is.
So, assertive community treatment teams are intense case management, and they would provide your psychiatry, your nursing, your case management, your vocational challenges, your housing, and so just some people, I just think about life, that we all want the same things. When you say, what do you want? I mean, we all want to feel loved and belonging, and we all want to feel like we have some choice over what we do with our days and where we live. And so even no matter where we are in the spectrum of mental illness, I think that we have human needs and want to get them met. So to meet the person where they're at, I think, is really important, no matter where.
You've been in the position of being that, as you said, that you've had depression and you've sought help for your depression. What was that getting help like at first? Tell the audience about that.
Well, it was a matter of accepting, that I was needing help, and reached out and went to some counseling. And I think that initial session is scary. It's where do I start? Where does this go? But I think what was shared here is a nice way to get it started in regards to what's bringing you here. Where can we go from here? Where would you like to see things happen? And I think from that they just can naturally kind of flow.
And I always say, sometimes people will come in my office and they'll say, oh, I'm not sure how this works or what to say, and say, well, that's my job. Yeah. And I'm going to help you tell your story of why you're here. And it's my job to ask the questions to help you tell the story. And I find that, most people find that relieving, that it's not like it is in the movies, folks, that you're not laying on a couch and smoking in my office. I can tell you that. That's not happening. Let's talk about the getting help process and all of that notion of cure versus recovery. I want to talk about cure versus recovery. Linda.
Well, tell me more. I mean, I believe in recovery. I guess I really do, and yeah.
I do too. But I'm not sure I always believe in the concept of cure. Cure, I think, for some people means I never have this problem again. I never have. For some people, I think they think it means I never have a problem again. And I'm not sure I believe in cure all the time. I believe in recovery all the time. So, okay, so now respond to that, Miss Linda.
Yeah, I think if someone's gone through a trauma, they can go and get and figure out some ways of coping until they are recovered. That trauma is always going to be in their DNA or in their, circuitry or whatever. So I think that we always work toward recovery. One of our favorite lines in the TAC program, the Transitional Assertive Community Treatment Program with the young adults 18 to 26, we'd always say, well, work is recovery. And I think about what would happen if you were told you couldn't go to work anymore, how devastating that would be. So I think recovery is feeling like you're reaching your potential and giving it your best shot. And so and everyone deserves that.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Brian, what would you like to add to that?
Well, I think recovery, is a slow kind of process, at least speaking for myself, a step by step, and progressively learning new ways of approaching situations or thinking. And at times you can get a setback, and then it's a matter of regrouping and seeking the help you need and then moving on. And that's been what my experience is, and from several people who come to NAMI, that seems to be a typical kind of a situation.
I like to add the word management in that, and whether it's a developmental or transitional process of struggling with emotions or relationship stresses or losses, what have you. It's about finding the coping tools and skills and managing that, and if that's sort of wrapped up. But I'll try to leave people with the idea of, life is something to just continue to manage. And if there are these sort of patterns or issues that come up in the future, part of managing them is using those tools in the toolbox, seeking help and resources. But if there is a more significant, a medical, depression or bipolar, mental illness, that part of management is again, that may be a long-term, lifelong management of the disease model of the condition.
Knowing your triggers.
Knowing your triggers, knowing your relapses. When are you starting to go down that slippery path, and then when is it time to hook people in, whether it's loved ones around you, your pastor, your physician, or help services, social services. But that's part of that management.
And about finding out how to live a life worth living for yourself, which
Yeah,
we all
living
can
well.
do, right? We all can do that, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have cancer or bipolar illness. It doesn't matter if you have diabetes or depression. That we all can still lead a life worth living. We may not be an Olympic gold medalist, but even without
most of us aren't anyway. But it's how do we think about having that disease?
Yeah.
How do we think about ourselves having bipolar? Or how do we think about ourselves having depression? Yeah.
Stories of hope. And we're getting a little bit short on time. Or a message of hope. Linda, what would you say is a message
there
of
are
hope?
lots of messages of hope. I think of one of the things with our population of seriously mentally ill is they die 25 years earlier than other people, and who don't suffer with it. And so our hope is that we start getting that fixed and treated. And one of our young people at TIAC died at 26, but his case manager found him on his couch dead. And we are in people's inner circles often. And but you know what? He had been institutionalized most of his life, suffered terribly, and he died in the best apartment he'd ever had, living his life the most free, the most, I don't know if happy is the right word, but just free and on his own and in his own place. And that to me is a success, that I wish he could have lived another 50 years, but he got his dream of living on his own.
A message of hope, Brian.
Well, approximately 4 years ago, there was not such a thing as a family resource, kind of for people who have family members living with mental illness. And now we have educational class or groups, programs through NAMI, and some support groups, and in a way a community that people can come to and feel safe. And that wasn't there a few years ago. It was isolating, and it is now. And and there's other new efforts happening in the community. as we go along.
Speak Your Mind, the show.
That's
Yeah,
true.
that's
That is exactly
that's
true.
another
Yes,
one.
yes.
Paul, your message of hope.
Well, I think, working a lot with teens and those that are struggling with depression, we've got, a depression and suicide problem across America in teens. And so working with young adults that are really, really struggling and literally at that verge, and working with them and being part of a larger team of caretakers, really. And I like that sense of hope. And to see them, years later, really happy and living a fulfilled life and reflecting back and go, wow, that really would have been a waste. That really would have been a waste. And being able to feel really proud that they have the courage, to step up, get help, accept help, and find that purpose in their life. And that's really cool. Keeps me going.
It does. I've gotten letters from when I saw people as teenagers. They're adults, and they send me pictures of their kids saying, "I'm so happy in my life now."
Yeah.
And I have a box, and I keep all of
Oh,
those as a way of saying, like, this is a very cool thing to be invited into people's life. We are out of time here, and in our message of hope, last week, Tahara Bushy, we mentioned that on her website she had this tip for parents, and the tip was to speak in 3-word sentences, and my 3-word sentence for you is, there is hope. Thanks again to all of you for being here out there. And don't forget to visit us on the web at speakyourmindonline.org, where you can find all of these resource links. We'll make sure that we get them up there. You can read my blog. That's the place where I'm going to answer more of the questions that came in tonight. And this is the last program of the season, but you can stay in touch with us all year long. I'm going to be blogging, not every week. I can't do that every week, not in my off season, but I will be blogging. I'll be posting during the off season, and you can friend us on Facebook too. I want to thank everyone who's made this such a great season on Speak Your Mind, our wonderful guests who are our ambassadors of hope, our phone answerers, and you, the viewing audience, because you make this show. This show is not just for you, you are part of the show. For the wonderful crew here at WDSE, WRPT, Joe, who keeps me on time, I'm Dr. Carolyn Phelps. Thanks for watching. Good night, and see you in September.